To start off our discussion, I would love for you to introduce yourself in your own words. Let us know who you are and what you do.
I'm a participatory artist and a designer, and I'm interested in looking at ways that we can engage folks to collectively talk about migration, but also change this like monolithic or like one narrative into something that is more pluralistic and non-linear.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the term participatory artist. As a collective, Memory Foam is really interested in participation and how like a space or a work can change depending on what a person in that space like does with it, and how it's this like living, breathing thing that evolves. And so I'm curious to hear more about your background with that and how you like what interests you about it.
Really, I've always been interested in working with people and not necessarily me being like the center point of the project. When I started doing work, I think my work was very categorized as social engage. But I knew I had like a lot of trouble with the language around it, because even though it was trying to place the artist as like someone that was building and working in community, it was like very much placing the artist as like this one person that could, with art, change something. And I think like art is one of the possible pieces that is allowed to change something, but it's not the only thing. With that in mind, I started thinking of like what were the things that were interested about this, like what was called social engage, and what did I wanted to incorporate in my practice. And I think that the first part of it was like really participation of people. I wanted to invite people to be part of the work and to co-create the work with me as well.
In speaking about your participatory projects, I want to ask about a specific piece, a recent piece of yours that you did at Recess, called $200 from Two, in which you asked visitors to the gallery to give you receipts for purchases of $200 or less. And then with the amount on the receipts, you then made collages that depicted the amount of food that could be bought in other countries. And this was a comment on the high remittance rate of for when people sent money back home to their family, immigrants who were sending money back home to their family. And so I'm really curious about the process that you go through from your like initial kind of subject matter that you want to speak about to the action that you create.
It started from like learning this data point that like in 2017, $500 billion were sent back to countries around the world just from the US. So that's like a crazy amount of money. For me, like this idea of like remittances, like in the DR, this is something that is like an expectation of like if you have a family member that lives in New York or lives elsewhere, they're either sending boxes of food to their family, sending money monthly. I was like thinking of this project specifically for Recess. I knew that the people that were going to come to the gallery space were not necessarily going to be people that are sending remittances home, right? So I wanted to make sure that I was like aware of the audience and how I would engage them into this conversation. I collaborated with a friend of mine, Agustin Daco, on doing this like he's an economist, and we did like all these data analysis of like what the dollar value would be in the other country. Like the point of reference was a coffee in New York City, which is like you could get a coffee from like $3 to $5 to sometimes like $8, like some charcoal latte shit. That is delicious, but
Or matcha.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's almost the amount that you pay in order to send money home, right? So, I was thinking of like, what are the ways that I could engage people into bringing this thing?
I'm thinking about also your project, Flowers for Immigration, which I think started also with kind of like a really simple and beautiful idea and was made very complex by, I mean, how you spoke about it. So for this project, you asked undocumented workers, undocumented bodega workers who maintain and make the flower arrangements, to make a bouquet in response to Trump's immigration policy. I actually really appreciated the way that you talk about giving people who participated in that project, like you say that it was a way to empathize for them while also like concealing their identity, and like the artistic freedom that you give to people who maybe wouldn't like self-identify as an artist. And so I'm really...
But they're making this arrangement all the time.
Right, exactly. And so like they wouldn't self-identify as
Yeah.
one, but like, I mean, I see them as an artist, and I think that the way that you've asked them to be a part of this project is like really special and like very powerful. And so I'm just curious what it's like working with people who maybe wouldn't self-identify as artists to aid in making your pieces.
The flower makers or like the bouquet makers, I tell them all the time, like exactly how I said, you know, you're doing this every day and people use these flowers to express themselves every day. Like either they want to say thank you, either they want to like show appreciation to someone or on grief or what have you. So why not use the same flowers that you're doing for someone else as like a way to express what you are feeling? And that's like an approach that I talk a lot about.
You've discussed being an immigrant yourself at a moment when this current administration continues to pass really harmful policy and hateful rhetoric towards immigrants. And all the while you've created work that deals with belonging and immigration. So I'm curious to know if with this current administration, has that hindered or challenged or expanded your art making ideas?
In many ways, like the current political situation like encouraged me to do work, but I also like to think that I'm not only focusing on like what is the current political situation. Like one of the reasons why I like doing the work I like doing is because I think that there's like so much, you know, beauty, joy, like resilience in like the communities that we all immigrants belong to, that I think it's important to highlight those things and not necessarily only do work that is like reactionary to like a political moment. You know, a lot of people ask me about this like immigrant question, and I always try to tell folks that yes, I'm an immigrant. Yes, I came here when I was like 21, 22, but I exercise a lot of privileges that are not the same that of like most of the folks I work with. And I'm trying to find ways to use my privilege in order to create spaces for others as well. And what I mean is like, you know, I have papers. I came here to study. I didn't necessarily come here because this was like the one and only opportunity, you know.
Collecting stories and archiving them, whether that be in the form of visual art or language, like in
This is a
zines
soup
that you
now,
make.
so.
I know, I kind of like it a bit soupy. Like, yeah, archiving these people's voices, like whether it's in like visual art or language, like zines that you make, seems to be like the primary focus of a lot of your projects. And the work you're making oftentimes takes something that's like ephemeral, like what people say or flower arrangements or conversations, and creates like a permanent space for them. And I think your work has a lot to do with archiving people's voices, like you mentioned earlier, especially people who we don't always hear from. And so I'd love to hear more about your ideas around the archive and why it's so important to you in your work.
I think it's important to like think of how we look at archives and who's in the archives and who has access to the archives as well. What is the shift politically that we're going to have to make to archives to actually make them feel inclusive and make it feel of the people and make them feel like everyone could have access to the archives, and that this is like a place that it shouldn't be sort of like an academic space. It should be a community space.
Accessible.
And accessible.
To the people who it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
So we play a game at the end of each...
Oh, God, no.
At the end of each interview, we do fuck, marry, kill.
Okay.
And you can interpret those how you want. Like if for kill, you want to be like Ghosted or something. With Sophie Calle, Taryn Simon, and William Pope L.
That's hilarious. It's kind of funny. Like, I wonder if I killed Tara Simon, would it be like a piece? Like, she would be like, I would be like, oh, let's kill each other. And then, like, you know, maybe we can make a piece out of it. Or, like, you know, it would be like, we would research, like, what are the different killing methodologies.
It would be like a 5-year process.
Yeah, exactly.
Up to it, figuring out, and then you'd like...
What is the tool that we're going to use? What I could do is, like, I could organize like the marriage of Pope L with some other artists. I don't know.
Oh yeah, like you could officiate it. So
yeah, I could officiate it. Maybe fuck Sophie Calle, because like maybe it'll be poetic in a way. It'll be some weird.
I'm sure she would also make work out of
yeah.
that too.